당주 단다 짐바 춘춘주 줘서 다 디리시 삼대 다 신내르도 덴베 하동기 아니 거쳐서 뉴모 넘버는 좀버 시치네 다 신내다 하노드네 돈네 아니 뉴모만 좀 얘기 치듯 좀저하고 시바 지내스라 아니 즈미실에 양다 데바이 삼대 고마제슬라네 슬라리도 당아도 단다 다 딘데 삼대 고음데 갈라타 삼대 다 즈미 커서티스 디갈 즈미실에 시기도 즈미시데 가서나 남시 타이 남카 타이 지야메 아니 가선데 시미 미치치 시시들어
타마디 카레나
데시미 미치치
두시
근데 시미란도
So now moving on, we are at the 29th verse, which goes on to talk about concentration, single-pointed concentration in particular. The practice of all bodhisattvas is to cultivate concentration, which utterly transcends the four formless absorptions, in the knowledge that mental afflictions are overcome entirely through penetrating insight suffused with stable calm. So penetrating insight refers to vipassana, or special insight, and stable calm refers to shamatha, or tranquil abiding. So when we are talking about the cultivation of one-pointed concentration, or shamatha, then as one cultivates the practice of shamatha, then one begins to abide in meditative stabilizations. You become you abide in meditative absorptions, and these are the four formless absorptions. The first absorption, 방법이 가르쳤는데
남시 타이.
So the first form of absorption is the absorptions of consciousness itself, and the second type of absorption is the vast expansive absorption of sky-like absorption, or space-like absorption. And then in the third absorption, then it is where nothing appears. In this absorption, nothing appears. And then the third one is wherein there is no active recognition of phenomena as such.
제자다 딘데치 아니 지당가서 삼대 시데 즈미 실래자라 단단나시다에 나가다에 지야미 시스 사마디 즈미 나셔도 다 삼대래 시르라
니 안주치서나
라
안주치서나 검소야 코미스 디 즈미 실래서
아 즈미 시드라 나시타에 나카타에 지야미 아니 데시미 미치치실래더라 모델.
So now a very rough translation of the four absorptions. To repeat them again, then there are four types of absorptions one experiences in the stage of cultivating one or pointed concentration. And the first one is the absorption into the consciousness itself, or awareness itself, in other words. And then the second one is the absorption which is space-like absorption, limitless, expansive space-like absorption. The third one is an absorption in which nothing appears. And in the fourth absorption, then there is no active recognition of phenomena or relating to phenomena.
지난디 곰제리가 그다 나와샤다는 지서라 그는 난카타르 타에서 안남시 나시타르 타에 안치야 일람이제바 라 안는 드시 되던데 미게 드시 밑에 들려기서라 된대긴 드시메바 네.
So in this, these are as we already talked about, the type of experiences, mental states one experiences through the cultivation of one-pointed concentration, wherein from experiencing the consciousness itself and the true awareness of the consciousness itself, one becomes absorbed in the true awareness of the consciousness. This is the first absorption into the consciousness itself. The second one is then you realize that the consciousness itself is like space-like, and then you begin to absorb, you begin to experience mental states which becomes absorbed into that space-like expanse. And then the third is wherein you realize that nothing is truly established, so there is nothing actively appears in the mind. Nothing appears in the mind. And then the third is, even if there are no phenomena appearing in the mind, there is a process wherein we begin to form conceptual thoughts, which is an active recognition and relating to outer phenomena or inner phenomena. But at the fourth stage, you have no such active recognition of outer and inner phenomena. So then when we are talking about the states of concentration, now in the process of cultivating one-pointed concentration or shamatha, one needs to experience these mental states in order to make development. But the way that one graduates from one state to the other state, then we talk about the first samadhi, second samadhi, third samadhi, and the fourth samadhi. So there are 4 types of samadhi, or one-pointed concentration, or so to say levels of concentration. So in the first level of samadhi, then conceptual thought or conceptual consciousness, as well as this basic, not intellectual, but basic discernment is active. So in the first level of samadhi, in the first samadhi, then one conceptual awareness and conceptual thoughts, as well as that basic discernment, is still active. In the second, one begins to experience bliss in the form of joy and happiness. And in the third, then one begins to experience an equanimous state of mind, a true equanimity at the third level of samadhi. So at the fourth stage, then you begin to experience both bliss and equanimity. So these are the kind of classical presentation on the levels and stages of shamatha and the mental states one experience. So rather than just saying that these are the presentation, one needs to actively now cultivate a practice wherein one has to experience these mental states for themselves.
shirab the kosum mimi ba topic ani shirab jila shigires tanda zodi kunzu da present di shirab haji ora.
So then moving on, the last of the 6 great perfections is wisdom. And the 30th verse, it reads, the practice of all the bodhisattvas is to cultivate wisdom beyond the 3 conceptual spheres alongside skillful means. Since it is not possible to attain the perfect level of awakening through the other 5 paramitas alone in wisdom's absence. So paramitas is exactly perfections, is the original Sanskrit word for perfection. And now in the presentation of this 6 great perfections, then it is explained that the first 5 are what we call skillful means, and the 6th one is wisdom itself. And in Buddhism, we talk about the importance of the union of skillful means and wisdom, method and wisdom. So the first 5 are skillful means, and the 6th is the wisdom of understanding the true nature of reality. Now herein, when we're talking about cultivating wisdom with regards to the skillful means of the other 5 perfections, then we need to understand that in all these acts of generosity, ethical restraint, joyful effort, patience, concentration, and so forth, there is always this conception that there is an agent, or let's say there is an object and a subject first, right? If you are practicing generosity, then there is a giver, and then there is someone you give to, and then in the middle there is the actual thing that you give someone. So those are what we call the 3 conceptual spheres: the object, subject, and the act itself. So at the time of cultivating wisdom, it is important to realize that all of these things, the object, the subject, and the act itself, are devoid of any true substance, devoid of inherent existence. So when you do that, then the skillful means are infused with wisdom. So even in the practice of generosity, as a perfection, not in like the normal sense of the word, but in the practice of generosity as a perfection, then one begins to look at the oneself as empty of being truly existent, the person you are giving it to as also being empty of truly being existent, and as well as the act itself as being truly being empty of truly being existent.
Cheza tanda shirab di nganzo kawaii ne pishita yin peke chumtoa lega chena lanu chena kawa chena ra linyi jibi lang to lanya da pa toja tsama nganzo shirab chigo ra cheza di shirab tuzo peke chum chidangi nganzo chik taba tang tang cheba ta re koma tawa laya tabshi ninja gugu res ra pena nganzo charo nangkala pyoba la shoba ninja gugu ra chiyo na chigi chichibu chidu goma ra shirab chibu na yang tanda nganzo shimba tabdi mewa ina di tu goma nadi nga tsa taigu chalaya shanchuki senwa shagi yarwa tagwe nyi ladi chezang tagwe nyi di sungdu dego ya tang an chida nga tsa lega kara chena shirab digi namchuki pechwe tani rwa lenye jibi di chena digi mdila susu lo yawa shibi go na chewa ina ani kangi tiki manda mambuchi rwa nga tsa mno tui mambuchi ngu diya di shirab pechwe ya madangi chena yungu ra.
So from the Buddhist perspective, in order to achieve perfect and complete enlightenment, one cannot do without either wisdom as well as skillful means. And now sometimes skillful means is explained to be bodhicitta itself. And now when we say that skillful means is bodhicitta itself, then when we relate it to the six great perfections, then the first 5 perfections are exactly what the bodhisattvas practice. So there is no contradiction in those 2 statements saying that skillful means is bodhicitta and skillful means are the first 5 perfections. And now wisdom is very important because when we understand the true nature of reality, then we can begin to discern for ourselves what to adopt and what to abandon. So unless and until we do not come to a true understanding of the nature of reality, we are always ignorant of what to adopt and what to abandon.
Tadine dang passion to the sasra. Tadine the jalan of Caradola, dang azuki, Chinaja Jun, the Susu, Tashi, the Bay, kitchen like the Ra. Digi, Shiloka, Sochi Badigi, Rangi Tuba, Rangi Matanas. Not Tuba, not no to Matana, Mission Baji La Cabura, Susu some tango vacation. Ani Suzuki Indoro, Susu Bega, Yanta by Insan, and Mahimba see it in Euro. They no to the Susu Taji, yes. Ani Chibi Zuji, Chimi Chesipe, the Nazuki, Machuchi, the Gomjagi, the Kandichi, the Tablo, the Chilakachi Waramato, Chibi Zudo, Kidena, Chimay Chesigues. Today, another Lola and Sian Taji, Esra, CBS, they should Corset, they should gender rangi Truba last. They should 2,000 ra. Ni Suzulega Karachi and Kalasan and Dona then attack Karachi in Suzuki Tuba, no to the Taji ra. Rangi Tuba last. Tani Pong. She's at the day Taji in no to Yuna and the Papon, and the Jesegi, Sajusemba Zuga, and young lady, Estra.
So with this, it concludes the presentation on the 6 great perfections. And from here on, it talks about the importance of contemplation in the form of investigation and how the Buddhist approach is to always look inside at the state of one's own mind. So the 31st verse, it reads, the practice of all the Bodhisattvas is to scrutinize oneself continually and to rid oneself of faults whenever they appear. For unless one checks carefully to find one's own confusion, one might appear to be practicing Dharma but act against it. So, if we do not take the time, if we do not take it upon ourselves to constantly check what is happening in our mind, then even if we put on all the appearances of practicing Dharma, saying like I'm wearing a robe, I'm meditating, and I'm reading scriptures, but if you do not take the time to contemplate on how your mind is, and the states of your mind, then it might be the case that it's just that you are acting as if you are practicing the Dharma. The real practice of the Dharma is that process of transformation of the mind, and for that to be possible, one needs to constantly investigate what is happening in the mind and to see if there are any confusion, delusions which give rise to non-virtuous actions within your being.
Chidi o ngan nyede kawi nga kapukajan san chig o kema tangi ngara tu notui mo ngosin to no kushiran zingma ninja gi nga yin same ti ra ti gi nje tudo ne ani nje tuba she la so kan mamuj lida.
So all the strife and conflict that we experience in our life come from this lack of such a practice, because we always think that we are in the right. We do not take the time to carefully check if somehow you are actively contributing to this adverse situation that you are experiencing. For example, if you get into a fight with someone, then why is there a fight in the first place? Because none of the two parties are willing to accept that there might be some fault on their own, because they do never take the trouble to see if I had done something wrong. Immediately, out of arrogance, out of ego, we begin to say that I am not in the wrong. So the Buddhist approach is to, before such a thing comes to pass, to always look inside and see, is there anything that I am confused about the situation? Did I make a mistake out of my delusion and confusion in this situation, and am I actively contributing to it? And when you do that, immediately one person might be angry, but the fight in itself, the conflict in itself, could be resolved from this point forward. So, as we already said, the general tendency as human beings is to always look at oneself as purely innocent and purely not in the wrong, and then look at others and their faults. And it is very tough for us to kind of look at ourselves and our own faults. But when we look at other people, we can immediately pinpoint all their faults and so forth. So the Buddha's approach is to turn that inwards rather than looking for faults in outside conditions, in outer objects, to look inside how the mind relates to this outside object, and is the mind being fooled by confusion and delusion in its relation to the outside objects. So, and then all forms of division in human society comes exactly from this kind of way of thinking. It's not only related to like yourself, as we already said, when you begin to identify with this self, then this self begins to identify itself with what it calls its own I. You begin to identify with the I that you have conceived of, and then this I begins to relate and equate itself with what it calls its own mine. So then, not only when we are blamed for something, we begin to immediately find fault in others. Then if someone we know, our friends and family, are criticized and so forth, then we immediately react in the same manner. Similarly, you form a political group, and then your political group is always in the right, the others are always wrong. Similarly, nation. So this is the manner in which all these kind of strife, conflict, division, no matter like the degree of their magnitude, comes from the same way of relating to the I. So in politics, this is much more evident, wherein you become like, what is it called, psychopaths, wherein you do not see the fault in your own political group or alliance, and then you actively begin to find fault in other groups which do not have any fault at all. So this all comes from that way of relating with the I and what the I calls its own. So moving on, the 32nd verse, the practice of all the Bodhisattvas is never to speak ill of others who have embarked upon the greater vehicle. For if, under the influence of destructive emotions, I speak of other bodhisattvas' failings, it is I who am at fault. So herein it talks about the importance of respecting someone who has taken the vow to enter the greater vehicle, the Mahayana path. And so based on appearances, we begin to kind of look down on people. And based on appearances, we kind of speak ill of other people, not realizing that these might be highly realized beings who have dedicated their whole life towards practice. And in doing so, then we accumulate great non-virtues. We accumulate bad karma as a result of that. And not only that, the accumulation of merits that we have gained so far up to this point stands at the risk of being extinguished by speaking ill of such highly realized beings. So it is the task, it is the practice of the Bodhisattva not to speak ill of anyone, irrespective of their appearances.
제가 저기 비기 미리 집부터만 가는 의미 기변은 가서 신이 따오데 남대 장우라 남대 뭔뭐요라 집부터만 가나요 가나요 시비에서라 대외요비 몇동신데 아니 받는 뭐 차오를 순라 디칼라나 문족이 다 가서 지선도 뭐 게스만 보지도 싫어 하고 있는 하면 된다 한다 먼저 신이 몇당 때도 메디 올라 벤 디가나 텔라요시나 몇 통고 말아 이나 디가나 깜바 지와이나 그냥 깜바 찍어요 뭐지 바기 메일 캔데고 말아 그래서 딘데 인산 디가라 지덴 디가라 아니 집부터만 뭐 보지요래 아니 그냥게 통고 말아 딘데 인산 남준이 밀카마 저저치고 뭐도 딘데위 사올라 베셔지 메디 가요 가서 하고 말했어.
So then in this day and age we are given to gauge someone's kind of standing on the basis of outside appearances, social stature and so forth. But these are not the concerns of a highly realized being or a true practitioner. So if you begin to judge someone based on such appearances only, then you stand at the risk of speaking ill and looking down on such highly realized beings. So for example, when we study dialectics, debate, then at the start of the Pramana Adhikara, which is the text or the compendium on valid cognitions, that at the start of the text itself it talks about how one cannot judge highly realized beings solely on the basis of appearances. And the verse kind of goes on to explain that you need to have conscientiousness in your relationship with other people, not solely basing your judgment on the basis of appearance. Because just as you would not realize if ash covers amber or burning coal, if ash covers burning coal, you will not realize that there is burning coal beneath it. Similarly, highly realized beings are like that. Through outward appearances, they might look shabby, poor, and so forth, but you stand at the risk of accumulating very bad karma and extinguishing your accumulation of merits if you speak ill of such a person. So I'm not sure if you know how it is when you burn wood, then it dies out, it forms into ash, and then there are like pieces of coal left. Nowadays you use gas, right? So I'm not sure how like relatable you find this. But yeah, when you cover a burning coal with ash, outwardly you wouldn't realize that there is a burning coal inside. So it's similar like that.
제가 드네 있는 거 저기 밀라카라는 사파는 거 가들리들라는 지우드도 드니까라 레이다. 그런데 대체 ከም담는 레어를 소소게 슈루세 견잔리 오더라 신진신레 다 가르 담고는 드드가라 아니 그런데 이제 지기에.
So then this is kind of evident in the fact when like political elections take place, and then this is the kind of tendency we have. We kind of judge people on the basis of outside appearances. So I'm sure you have voted in your lives. So what were the kind of considerations before you gave your word to someone?
No? Chimera.
Do you go by outside appearances alone, or is there something more to it than that in that process?
Level of intelligence, speech, use.
The chi number some the duya mares. We do the zamani ko kaze lojum kaze do namju kaze do the del tagis.
Dita ra di phagi mi de mamba chegwa mara. Tang mi dangwa ko lojum khande do ke khande do ngima khande sheshara. Ane kora jigin la ya de khande do. Ko chashi khande kuni tani damna digda. Kashi di nga di dangwa na di be mara so shim de se mara so se ge mara. Kina azda di de ko pesun re mara kina khari ne ra. So so shodel pe ka ka jang di tanda nga nge chapsi gala nga thong de pe shar ma to. Di khawa iner da. Anzu leva khari chine so so chik te ka ka jang chik na na ja ande sone ra.
So then, politics entails a sense of allegiance, and we kind of conceive of these allegiance in our head. And then in that process, it is in the nature of politics to kind of paint a bad picture of someone else, and then paint a very good picture of the one that you want to vote for. This is not the approach. One needs to equally, like based on empirical evidence, judge the two persons on their capacity, on their qualifications. So that's the point that's being made here, that you should not like out of a sense of allegiance, out of a sense of outside appearance, then begin to speak ill of someone else. You need to take into account empirical evidence of who they are as a person, what are their qualifications. But this is not the way in which we approach politics. In politics, it is always you paint a bad picture of someone else, and then you paint a very good picture of the one you will want to vote for. So maybe it's a small example, and we need to relate this we need to relate this to other instances of our life, wherein when we begin to develop relationships, allegiance to some cause, and so forth, we immediately kind of paint a bad picture of some of the forces against the cause that you are supporting. So that's not the approach that is advised from the Buddhist perspective.
Sumju so ni sum de ra. Dala ni ko wangi so so la ni ba da ku de de ra. Ni ba na so ji gi juno no jara ya ku de na ne ku je de de tam ni da ta de ra. Ku de wangi yes ra. 편조 주죠. 아니 근데게 수터도 고사다 다 간도 사만 되는 두쇼도. 되네 왕게 아니 파츠 쯔버줘야 당. 아니 쯔버줘야 당스. 근데 тө상 공배 자와냠질이 된데기 지기 시랑 로존체 나래 퇴바체 상회 공바체 가디 제 있는 근데만 냠로서 유라. 아니 따디칼라나 자시 자시 침달라데 수족이지 중국예부 된데기 침상다. 오늘 수족이 진다이 치더라고. 된데기 된다래 같이 두두 전유지라. 진다라스 차법봉 두두기 아니 두두 수족이 년인데 당 수족이 진다로도 두두라 신자 쉬고 싶어. 아니 두두 차법 두두 제잖아. 라. 이 칼라는 수족이 로전 쳐야 될라. 냠도를 담년다데 그때도 된데기 치더니 마부 채워이나 뭐 야고요 말했을 텐데 인자 된데 유유도들 아니 차법봉 그래서 된데 뽕와이나 제스 상주 선배기 아니 라렌데스 로.
So then the 33rd verse is kind of addressed to ordained people, more like, for example, it talks about the practice of all the Bodhisattvas is to let go of attachment to the households of benefactors, of family and friends, since one's study, reflection and meditation will all diminish when one quarrels and competes for honors and rewards. So then, as spiritual ordained people, we have sponsors, benefactors, and then we have our own family and friends who support us. So then, as spiritual practitioners who want to become, who want to generate that altruistic intention, it is important first to learn to let go of these worldly concerns of gain, fame, and name. When we become concerned with such things like gain, fame, and so forth, then we begin to develop attachment towards these things, and as a result of which we begin to fight and quarrel for these things, sponsorships, patronage, and so forth. So it is the practice of the Bodhisattvas to let go of all such worldly concerns and then to let go of attachment towards patronage, sponsorship, support of friends and families and so forth. Because if you begin to engage in the pursuit of such things, such worldly concerns, then your motivation changes, and if your motivation changes, then you are not able to pay full attention to your study, contemplation and meditation. So this is why it is important to learn to let go of worldly concerns and the subsequent attachment that we develop towards such worldly concerns. So if there are any questions so far? Judging by the silence, I think everyone understood it perfectly so far. So the silence could be the result of one of three things. One, you didn't understand anything at all, then no doubts come at all. Two, you understood everything, and now there is no doubt. Yeah. What is this? Somebody got this. Chik machine ne tiwa chik yan leo marla. Chik sang machine ne tiwa leo marla. And the third is you do not care. So so which of these three are you? Question?
We are studying that Bodhisattva has to cultivate wisdom and skillful means. Yesterday we said that if someone comes to chop the neck, the Bodhisattva should stand happily and let it happen. But wisdom would say that save your neck. So how do you relate to these two things? Skillful means wisdom and chopping off the neck.
Tini tiwadi dirta tanda nganzo ani tuduro tinangla ani tabdan shirap sumri gorin sunguduwas chanju sembagi nyamne di te ina ani kasang tinangla ani yang kasang yaga doja dolara ni rangi sogla tuna yang sogla danche wala vero ani tinang shi rangi mijigi rangi go jega lena yang go ji jugur la vero lo dang ko de le shi gas kisi ngunne shirap de mijigi na soso gi soja biros 근데 서울로 당 책임 말았어. din이 또 겐다로 책임도 해.
네. 제가 디컬러나 랑기 소 체네 체추르레데 zuve 냠네 체비네다스라 냠네 오니 냠네 체도 보지 체투이나 지르가라 텐데기 르당 체투지 고레라 시비터라 지랑 단단하서 되게 다시니 고르네 내가 가르다 가르쳐와이나 다시니도 손으로 드드가라파 다시니도 베제땅도 가라 파기들 칼로다 쉬우지 카테 잡이 된다 말아 수수기 랑가도서 야 가르도 단도에르면도 파기들 많이 안 내는 야 짠 너에게 된다도 말았어.
So then when we are talking about the kind of examples that were given in the previous verses wherein if one should even let go of one's own life and one should even let someone chop their heads, it's talking about the extent of genuine practice. And the extent of genuine practice is, in this example, it is talking about the extent of genuine practice of tolerance in this case. So, if one really has perfected the practice of tolerance, then even if it comes at the expense of one's life, a bodhisattva would give up their own lives. This is the kind of meaning of the verses. And of course, when we are talking about skillful means and wisdom, then when we are talking about the union of skillful means and wisdom, Generally, the way that we relate to adverse conditions is that adverse conditions, and especially if there is someone who is actively inflicting harm upon us, our reaction is more of a, in one case, it's more defensive, in other case, it's more aggressive.
Now, it's like if you see a tiger in front of you, you would immediately climb a tree.
Mm.
So the tiger cannot climb the tree.
Mm.
So this would be wise to do that.
거의 딩가 이제 따지기 줄 정말리게는 주로 행동자나 존나 야기로 왔어. 싫어 표주다는 남주 표주다는 장막 내 거서 행동하나 야 자도나 야기로 왔어. 딜하게 그랬어. 답도 싫어.
그래. 딸랑도 주버스 고마시면 그때가 수수기리. 야, 네.
So that is what we mean by skillful means and wisdom. A reaction that is neither defensive nor aggressive, wherein you do not, as a reaction, harm the source of the aggressor.
You don't harm the other and you don't harm yourself, so both are safe. Both are in safe condition.
네. 수수기 파카디 맞잖니라. 수수기 메시지를 되느라. 계속 저런 게 따지 처음에 따도 파세는 그 수제되게 돼서 딜레스에만 거지 수수 가서 다 텐트에 집어로 신바 입나 야가도 파트르네 야가도 힘을 자네 야가도 피카르타야라 오늘 담분에 따요서 만드네 야가도 딩가 저 탑시라 라
So yeah, the method is not to put oneself in such a place of danger in the first place. And for that you need a little bit of wisdom too.
잔들아 저 좀 담도 잠저 담유라고라 이건가도 담리더라 안티도가 저기 만드네 때 탑이라 오 내가도 여기 있는 니무도야 미 망보이도가 돼 그렇게 남주도 비슷한더라 다 걸리 dom이네 지네 지나고도 되네 디디 저기 dom라서 봐 거기 계셔마라 this 산마다 렌다기 내가도 그라 다 디디 디중이 신발 내가 망보야
So then, okay, for example, in Dharamsala, in this area, there are mountain bears, and they come out in the winter, and then the Tibetans, they do a lot of circumambulation around the Dalai Lama's temple. So then, if the mountain bears come out in the morning and in the evening, then it makes sense for you not to walk alone on the same path in the morning and the evening. That's using your wisdom. And it's not practicing tolerance at this point. It's just that you are keeping yourself away from harm's way. So that's what we mean by skillful means and wisdom. The wisdom to think about it, and then the skillful means not to actually go in the morning and the evening, and to go when there are enough people walking around in the Kora.
야, 나 딸아서 공위를 저런 생각으로든 디 따다지되고 뭐라.
So saying that you want to cultivate forbearance and then going for a walk in the evening and morning when these bears are about does not make sense at all.
근데도 다디 다나서 비춰지는 지나 내가 그러이네라. 그들을 봐자.
So this is an absurd example, but we can kind of try to relate it to all manners of things that we do in our life.
신바예, 신바에
Questions?
야, 얘는 세고 말더라. 그러이네란도. 그런 얘기를 해와라. 걔는 라바든 것도 딜레비는 도바로 남도로 가르치면라. 지진은 길레기 노이나 엔데로 사메이나 디기도 잠자디 고 세부 마고이나 그러이네 수로치라. 디 도바도 바퀴르는 줘요라. 먼저 담아다녀서 소소니 마시와 유시그리 아니 게 미셔발 투고다 다레 내가 아주 고네티에 유시그리 제가 지난주에 도바도 자원이 바퀴는 만들어지 담아다녀서라.
So please do not hesitate to ask questions, because I appreciate transparency and candor, because my intention is that as you walk away from this course, you do not walk away with the same baggage of doubts and hesitations. It's better to kind of place it here in the group and address it, and if I'm able to do it, then I'll do it. It might also be the case that maybe there are some misunderstandings. And it might be the case that you have doubts about the way that I explain things. So it's better to kind of place your doubts here in the sessions themselves rather than carrying them with you back when you travel away from here.
제가 가서 드시되 담코는 서서 뱀핀이나 지라 추로래 드시리 못 사마치기 세고로 개구지요 말아 가르예네.
So as I already stressed at the start of the course, we need to recognize each other as spiritual friends. So as spiritual friends, we need to be open with each other. 고치 치주나 고치기 있어.
So when you say that in some situations you have to use your wisdom and intellect to do some things that might contradict in appearance the teaching, but in some other cases it seems that it's very strict. You have to, like, for example, for the respecting the non-virtuous actions, you cannot bend the rules, like even at the expense of your own lives. For example, like in some situation, like lying might put you out of trouble. Like, so you can argue that like breaking this rule of lying may make you able to practice Dharma longer in your life. So I want to know what's the like, are there, for example, 10 non-virtuous actions? About the 10 non-virtuous actions, these are
Non-negotiables.
Non-negotiable. Like, you cannot use your intellect to bend these rules.
그 지어들 되게 디스 겐다로 만보 통과들스라. 가이나나 만족이 솔로 토나야 지름내 다음에 레송도 왔어. 야 솔로 토나야 수박 공부를 레송도 왔어. 제주선 바이기 냥 죽나?
아, 솔로 토나야
수박 공부. 수박 공부를 레송도 왔어. 야 솔로 토나야 지름 송고를 레송도 왔어. 라. 그 지름 송는 다른 만족이 저기 미디어 쪽으로 시작했어. 다 베나차시마니 미기와 추기다 배 추는 가지고니 미기와 추라 니추 니버추에 요 말베스라 카이나나스라 참좀 준티스 시나스라 소소디 속자베로 어디니 용시가스 니 치어 징기 소소 속 타르나스라 소소 추치에라 니 고감 망아바스 니 다디 카티스 겐다로레기다스 디 칸데레스
네. 지단 가지고 시에 약보여 말해라라. 이내 좀더 속을 투어이네데 가샤도 고발을 되려냐 요르 쳐려라. 지금 근데 저 땅에 야보다 가는 가지고 그냥 어디 데레질라시 디니 게다를 탄도는 야봅니다. 제스디 배신나로라 지단기 엔드 치지요 말 고마이네 고야요 말해라 타지라. 주마이네 시지요 말. 지단 야보 말어. 다이네 가샤도 고바도 심지 마보라 저랑 전시네 쉬우지 마보지 펜토나 디다. 됐으라. 아니 소소제도나 가샤 고발을 때네 엔드리게 나와요라.
So then it's good if you ask these kind of questions, because now if we do not ask these kind of questions, then we walk away from here thinking that these things are very contradictory, the teachings are very contradictory, and now you have the chance to resolve this contradiction. And so, as we already said, these are not forceful edicts, the non-virtuous, the ethical restraint that we cultivate in observing in not engaging in the 10 non-virtuous actions are not forceful edicts. And then even in the sutras it talks about how one needs to always weigh the pros and cons of a situation and not kind of put a blanket judgment on situations. And for example, when we say weigh the pros and cons, for example, if, like as you said, the non-virtuous speech that is lying, so it might be the case that if you lie, you save the lives of so many people, and in this case it makes sense to lie, because through that small act of lying you are saving so many other people's life. So in that case, even in the sutras it talks about, yes, such a thing is permissible. But you accumulate the karma for actually lying itself, but the intention is different. The intention is not to fool someone out of their property or something. The intention is to fool someone to save so many people's life. So yeah, morality is not like absolute in that sense.
Nima di chi da ngamba ji se ku shawa ne ji se de chin ra di tu zu pe shan ku le pheng da de u de chi da ki ta da ge long ge zu sing de de ji chhe tin sa ra da ma zu nam chi ko ra chhe ta ni de ma ma ru ba yin la wa ra da shawa de de ma tu yo ma ra den la de da mi di ku de u ni di ku shawa de di ge yo ha ko ra ani shawa de ko do se la de la ku ge ka la thoma se la ra
Mare de
de bo do ma se ma ba ko de bo ma se la
shawaji nai thomas.
de bo tu shawa
Nemba du shawaji nai de do
저 저 토마스 라라. 티칼 지나 코즈는 저 조금 말에 게츠는 것도 봐야 되고 좀 마시 조금 말에. 다 이네 코드 뎀바레 레디오레 뎀바 투베기 샤와지 까 뎀바 마투베기 샤와지 뎀바 도요 마. 라. 뎀바 마투바 뎀바 투베기 샤와지 도요 마.
Nemba du shawaji nai de do thomas.
제선 디라운데 가라. 예, 그 샤와데 짜베긴데 봐요레. 야 좀 마시네 디고. 다 디고 남주데 베지단 되네실라.
So maybe you will understand it better if we talk about this anecdote. So there was a hermit who was an ordained person, and he was meditating, and then in the jungle, let's say, and then there was a hunter who was chasing a deer, and then the deer just passed by the hermit's place, and then right after that, the hunter came chasing after, and then the hunter immediately asked the monk, did you see a deer running away from here? And then realizing now he cannot lie because he's an ordained person, then the monk said, I did not see a truly existent deer running away from here. So he used all of his intelligence to kind of save the deer's life and not lie in this situation.
그래서 단도 치기도 갈라나 지당 저기 심지 미도 세디 야부 말아야 라 이내 가샤기 고발을 때는 단도 대변 이지진 지당 고상주 선배이라 오래 되게 대 맨날 돈도기 민가자 세야기 아니 되게 내가지 지도라 콘도 진날 두고서 냠도 라 민난 두도다 아니 디나로라 미 갑자 신냠도 요베지 아니 대변 이지진에 대변 이지진은 고트당이더라 다 거기 디 미드 세기에 민 망갑자데 세기요 하고 되가 거기 디 미치드 세샤라 라 다치다 그 샤주 선발에 되게 메시는 디기 말하라나 지난 오늘 저는 메시는 디고만 이내 그 갈라 그 딜레 니진 그 계속 민가자지 세와이나 그다 디파 삽청 무슨 저 다음에 번요 로고에 책이라 되네시네요 거기 나중에 비슷한 야 세바다 민가지 잡아기로 주요 세상 좀 점점 게더 통구다 근데 뭐야
So then, if we begin to think in such absolute terms all the time, then contradictions are many. So, for example, there is another story from the Buddha's previous life itself, wherein he was born. He was a captain of a merchant ship, and then as they went to sea, then the captain came to realize that one person was about to kill the rest of the crew, 500 people. And then the captain took it upon himself to kill this person before he kills the 500 people. And he did it out of compassion, saying that if I do not do this, this person is going to accumulate such bad karma of killing 500 people. So I will take this bad karma upon myself rather than let him suffer and let the 500 people lose their lives. And he killed that person. So yeah, you take a lot of things into consideration to make a decision. So morality is not absolute in that sense.
죄송한데 나도 남주디 배 개침물더라. 다 좋아이니 마음도 거나 저디라. 제가 단다 뜻돼.
가망나
아니 좋아지긴.
So we pick
정말
one.
저런데 디셀라 거나.
Were you
Yeah.
good?
It's okay. Yeah.
So one last question before the session. Quran Chiglena.
I would also like to go back to the non-virtuous actions of the mind. I struggle a little bit with practicing non-covetousness, and I'm just wondering because those kinds of thoughts come quite automatically.
napsimira. Tanda miyo chubine napsim migi chalala chakwa shayashida. Ti kurangla rangjune rangshingi shukchambur ligidus. Ani kayo laigi manzuki napsim dida jomela yura. Nyamne do khande chawres.
Tanda sula di jingi mi junorin la ra yang jan. Tan zamza nganzu di napsen do di jine da junodi la ra susugi chi mara dil napsen di chiba la tena nganzu gi le lega mambu ji chi go da ra. Kira gi junodi la cha wa ina di raya la tabji tambu kazang nganzu shiba yin ba. Jala di raya tambu so nao di yang jan. Kodi sem pura chutsar tagi. Tagi kira pe ngela sem lulu yabo je na. Di jala di la yansi susugi dendin yawa di na jan kodi di gala susugi namzu sen shiwa lulu di me bacha ra. Tadi raya la tabji tanga la ngu sao go ra. Jala di zao chambu nyogo na ngu di kante sao. Yang sang mambu chi tango ra. Zuma shi go do mi la kade o shi go do kane li do. Tadi juno di ruwe la chirang di pechi di ruru zo tsana. Ngani yang pata sada sunga la sopa ki tani kangi mambu ta. Di zu ki juan zi mambu di tenwa ina kira di napsen di koya la tis mahi. Kya tuku ra yecha.
So, in order to combat covetousness, then one cannot immediately kind of subdue covetousness. One has to first contemplate on the nature of covetousness. And as we already discussed, it's important to repeatedly contemplate and investigate the effect of such a thought upon your behavior, upon your mind. For example, as we already said, that once you begin to covet something that belongs to someone else, then immediately it disturbs the natural peace of the mind. This is the first effect. And then when you begin to realize this, then what happens next? See, then all of your thoughts are consumed by this. You begin to devise means through which you can get this thing for yourself. And then you have to actually strive to get this thing for yourself. So all these efforts naturally disturbs the natural peace of the mind. And as you do that, then it might be the case that you become very manipulative. If you try to get what you want through ethical means, it's one thing. But then many times it is the case that you devise plans which are very manipulative to get what you want. And then herein is the danger. Now you are actively, it's just not a thought at this point. Now you are actively engaging in lying to other people to get what you want.
I feel that for me, I guess this is very personal, but I feel that for me, then what happens is I think that that person is in a different level than me. Because they maybe look this way or have this thing or practice in this way, or, you know, it's not just like a physical possession. It's maybe a quality, a personal quality that that person has, and I think that they are better than I am, or so then I put myself lower. That's more of what I feel happens to me.
Kurangi tanda di sangsingi chalangabu ground lagi mesra. Migi yunden ro de ba. Dindela dis chapado chigida.
Mi lojong ajike.
Yunden. Lobjong rang mai boda mila chig yunden ro yora kashi nama zebo ro yujula. Nama zebo do le ya mila yunden ro yora da. Kija shike bu ro yina. Chig yora.
Mi nga mi gi din na chi cholan dil chawa. Kudo chile.
Tin napse rang rigira ina.
Mi gi yende de to nga de gara chi gile de. Te napse de kangi shira chi. Su kantu du chi ne.
To moyi dinde samtang de zamasra. Soso nya chagi dus la horma. Soso ma sem shum ru dus. Kola dinde to ngala min du la beto.
Tadi nga zu di de ra nga zu densen ro chi ma.
Sem shum.
Densen. Kan densen ina di ita nga zu soso la kanga yuba de deba tsinga de peke chi. Ra. Nga zu deba ma singa kangi ma mili ora. Kol de du ngala mi du kol de Digi susu le yuba kanga yuba de batsi mache. Digi chidang susu yaja tayana de bizo de chigura.
So then, technically speaking, we would not call that coveting. We would say that it comes. Now it doesn't matter whether we call it coveting or not. We need to understand where it comes from, and it comes from a lack of contentment with what we have, or who we are as a person. And from that comes comparison. Comparison. You begin to compare yourself with others, and when you do that, then you develop a sense of competitiveness out of that. So this is the process in which you begin to you begin to covet people's qualities or people's things. So then, what did we realize in this kind of gradual contemplation? Contentment is very important first. Without contentment, then we begin to compare, compete with others. So first we need to come to a place wherein we are able to accept who we are as we are. And then what we have, we need to learn learn to be content with what we have.
Pene Kurang yegi tanda napsin chesegi shidira. Pero shana samidela kare shiya yende habno pe pusun soba jiwa ina. Suso yadi janga ra. Ine kodi do chimatu na senshu chago yamas. Kanyu junyu chindi. Ine ko chasegi nge shidi tata jungo tsumdira. Ra. Di kukul na shingi lobyo raya ngaya buju cheyera.
Tati moy tagaran mi lobjong daw da ina ya ra. Tena shin chögi nyamle. Ko nyamle de tsu de bache tu do le ya de la chik chaya ro ya. De do lo.
De so kanyu junyu cheyera. Di maju na digala sembala nge kurna ji chetum la de indendo majena di.
So then Geshema was confused with regards to what exactly is the object of covetousness in your case. And then I explained to her that it could be anything, a quality that someone has. And then you talked about how someone has cultivated spiritual practice and so forth. So it's the same with regards to knowledge, quality, spiritual practice. First we need to accept where we are and who we are, and only then can we begin to work towards developing ourselves from that point forward. If we do not have that, then we begin to kind of look at someone who has developed a meaningful practice and then become jealous, and then we compare ourselves with them, and then we do not put our efforts where it is required. Our thoughts are consumed by such things. And then as a result, we begin to bully ourselves. In a sense, like we begin to feel a sense of inadequacy about who we are. So it's better first to accept who we are and where we are, and that is what exactly is contentment.
Tichitangi pene mola ani lobyo ro ya bujina. Ngakuna chigu sayaro di ansens kona shira nujimda. Tende de kemda. Tangi ngakole yaga chigu kugi ma meba so san. Tende gi naps dujechena dingi ga zawda.
So the way that covetousness works is that you want something other has for yourself. And in that process, the way you relate to the object of your covetousness is, I want this for myself and I want it from him. This is the way covetousness works. Whereas merely relating to someone who has developed a meaningful spiritual practice, saying that, wow, he or she has developed such a meaningful practice, doesn't necessarily have the same effect on you. You can actually become more motivated if you appreciate it, and you can become more motivated and inspired. But covetousness is like that. So you do not take into the account that you have to put in the effort yourself. You want it like magically for yourself. Covetousness.